Back on the Newsfeed PM, police are investigating a case of 6 decomposed bodies discovered in Soweto on Friday. The bodies were found near an old mine in Diepkloof near Newzroom. Police are suspecting that the victims are illegal miners. Well, we're joined now by David Van Wyk, a mining expert, to talk a little bit more on this. David, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Just a couple of months we were dealing with the situation in Stilfontein, and now, of course, we are seeing some of these activities beginning to emerge also in some mines here in the Gauteng province. Many weighing in on this have said that the South African gold mines, especially the derelict ownerless one, have been taken over by criminal gangs. Is this indicative of that?
Well, I think, yes, it's indicative of a number of problems. And the problems relate not only to the closure of mines, but also to the way we deal with the migrant labor system. It also deals with the fact that we are not making a transition, a just transition from large-scale mining to smaller and medium-scale mining, which we've been calling for a very long time. We cannot expect that large-scale mining will go on forever. You know, minerals are not renewable, and therefore mining is not sustainable. So we've got to scale down when mines need to scale down instead of just abandoning them. And we are paying a heavy price now for that neglect of that infrastructure that was there, that mine infrastructure that was there, because we allowed big companies just simply to walk away from their responsibilities according to law to actually rehabilitate or repurpose or re-engineer these mines. You know, we are concerned because some of the Zomas that we have spoken to in the last 2 or 3 weeks have told us that they find their explosives in bunkers underground. In other words, the mine owners abandon the mine and they abandon the mine with explosives. We see the same explosives appearing in ATM bombings. We see the same ones in cash in transit, heist robberies, and so on. So, you know, an old mine that is abandoned can be very lucrative for any criminal syndicate that takes it over, apart from the fact that they will exploit the former mine workers that they find living in the area. You know, so we have a really, really serious problem because we're not paying attention. If you go to the Diepkloof area, I can go with you and we can walk onto any mine dump, into any mine site that has been abandoned. By law, these mine sites should be secured, they should be signposted, and there should be security around them, which there is not at the moment.
So what other gruesome findings could we possibly find lying down there? I mean, you're saying there are explosives that have been left there by the previous owners. Now we are finding bodies down there. What other gruesome discoveries could we find if we head down that way?
Sorry, just repeat your question there for me.
I'm saying what other gruesome findings could be lying underneath those abandoned mines?
Well, you see, the other thing which is very worrying for us is that the Zamas tell us that they get 5-liter bottles of mercury from somewhere. Someone is supplying them with this mercury. One 5-liter bottle is 160,000 rands. You can go and check on the internet if you don't believe me. An eye drop container is 1,000 rands. And this is what they use to extract the gold from the ore with. They crush the ore, then they wash it through mercury. The gold sticks to the mercury, then they blow out the mercury with a blowtorch, and they're left with nuggets of gold, which is retained after the mercury is taken out. The mercury itself is very, very poisonous also for groundwater. People with boreholes and so on will get poisoned if this mercury gets into the groundwater. But it's also very, very bad for the mine workers themselves. You know, it's exceptionally poisonous. Now, who is supplying them with this mercury? I did a search on the internet and I found that there are some companies that actually advertise that they sell to medium and small scale miners. Mercury should not be sold to mining companies at all because it's not supposed to be used in the mining process. Yeah. Cyanide has replaced mercury a long time ago, and cyanide is much safer to use, but you can't use it for small-scale mining. Yeah. So these guys who are underground actually needs to be trained how to extract gold without using mercury. Yeah. But that can only be done if you actually regulate the small-scale sector, you begin to train people there, you begin to eliminate the syndicates, and you begin to create a meaningful economic activity instead of the criminal economic activity that is there now.
So exposing some policy-making gaps there as far as regulating that particular space, but also you highlight something around the immigration law gaps. What needs to be done? What would be a focused strategy there that is currently not being applied to tackle that immigration gap?
Well, the Zamas tell us that they get recruited. They tell us that there are people who come pretending to be recruiters and labor brokers and so on to Lesotho and other countries and to the Eastern Cape and so on. They drive past you with the bakkie. They ask you if you want a job. If you're unemployed, obviously you're going to say yes. Then you find yourself illegally in a mine, or you find yourself in an abandoned mine under very dangerous conditions. We really need to organize a way to find out what is happening on the surface. We all know what is happening underground. We need to know who supplies the mercury. We need to know who recruits the labor. We need to know who buys the gold. We need to know how that gold circulates further into the economy and so on. Unless we begin to do the necessary investigations on the surface, we're going nowhere. We also know that, syndicates have paid for elections in Lesotho. The ABC party was funded by syndicates there. We know that in local government elections, which are coming up in South Africa, previously there were candidates in the Machabeng area, for example, where the people there tell us that those candidates were funded by criminal syndicates linked to mining.
Now, as far as the tactics of the Operation Valumgodi and its effectiveness, what could certainly be done there? Some political parties, for example, are calling for a specialized policing unit that is going to patrol all of the 6,000 or so derelict and abandoned mines that we say we have. How effective would that strategy be?
Well, why should the cost of securing these mines be brought to the taxpayer and to the public when, in fact, the corporations who are responsible for these mines should have done that in the first place? And there's a 50 billion rand fund that is available for mine closure and rehabilitation. You can take the entire police force and put them around abandoned mines, and I can tell you crime is going to spiral out of control in all other areas because that is where the focus will be. You need to make this into an economic activity that is legal, that is regulated, that is controlled, and that has eliminated the syndicates. Otherwise, you're never going to win the battle. And the police, I really feel sorry for them because they are fighting a losing battle. Last year, in the same area of Diepkloof, Riverlea, and so on, they closed down 27 shafts at a cost of 120 million rands. Those same shafts are now open again. I can send you videos of community members taken there in the area of Crown Mines, Shaft 17, Diepkloof, and so on, where the shafts that were supposedly capped with concrete blocks have been simply compromised and circumvented.
Yeah. The South African Human Rights Commission is holding an inquiry in May, and one of the things that they're going to look at is their policy-making environment. They say there is some kind of policy that is in place as far as artisanal mining is concerned. You're calling for a transition, or at least a transformed policy for that matter. What does the current policy say around artisanal mining, and what could assist us in that policy currently?
Well, the current policy, we contributed to that policy, but there are certain things that we don't really agree with. For example, they say that the artisanal miners can only mine the mine tailings and waste on the surface. The problem is that all the mine tailings and waste have been given to large companies, companies like DRD Ergo and so on have been given the licenses to mine those. Even though the Minister of Mining says that tailings are not mine-related, they are water affairs issues. So you can't give Zamas or artisanal miners or small-scale miners the tailings when the tailings have already been given to someone else in the first place. The second problem with the policy is that it says you cannot hire foreign workers if you run a small-scale or an artisanal operation. But the large companies are allowed to do that. And the only people who know how to mine are the people from the Eastern Cape, the people from Lesotho and southern Mozambique and parts of Zimbabwe. South Africans were excluded from mining by apartheid. Black South African labor was restricted to agricultural labor in this country in the deal between maize and gold that was made in 1910.
So if we were to then change that policy, I mean, you suggest it should include mining underground. It should also permit, as far as you're concerned, those particular miners from outside of South Africa to be able to work.
Yes, I agree. I totally agree with that. I think that is what should actually be happening. The other problem which is there is that if we look at those mines around Diepkloof, they are filling up with water. They are now up to level 5, which is very close to the surface. Someone needs to pump that water. If that water doesn't get pumped, it's going to spill out. In parts of the West Rand, it's already spilling out, and it's radioactive, and it's acidic, and it's extremely dangerous. You know, if you have people working in these mines, in the upper levels of the mines, at least you can then begin a process of formalizing the pumping of this very poisonous water that is spilling out everywhere.
That might be a challenge for policymakers, especially considering the huge unemployment that South Africa already has and the noise that's already on the ground to say, well, we need to prioritize jobs for South Africans.
Well, I think that is important. You know, that particular issue is important. But we can be creative around those particular issues. You know, I remember being in exile in Zimbabwe, and Mugabe said, you can work in my country, but you must train someone else to take your job eventually. Right? So when we bring people in to work with South African operations, and you can make these South African operations South African owned. You know, at the moment, there are very few industries in this country that are actually owned by Black South Africans. This can be one of those that can be totally owned by Black South Africans, and they can employ migrant labor as their employees on the condition that there is training that is taking place, and on condition that we retain some of the profits from these operations to actually increase the skills levels within the country for this type of work. You know, mining underground is very specialized, it's very difficult, and it's very dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing, you can't just create jobs willy-nilly with people who have never been in a mine.
David Van Wyk, appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for this afternoon. That's David Van Wyk. They're weighing in. Police discovering 6 decomposed bodies in a mine that is abandoned in Soweto. Investigations there continuing as far as the motive behind their death.